What's going on, people? It's Appalachian ADV Rider. I've got a very special knife here. This knife has been in my possession for a very long time, but I've never done a review on it. I don't know if I've done an unboxing or not, but this is a full review of this knife, and it is one of my favorites. So I carry knives for two purposes. One of them is I like a heavy duty knife when I'm out and about, um, and I want something that's capable. Let's just put it that way. And then another knife that I carry is something that is very purpose built knife. Typically, it's something that's going to be rust proof because I will either be camping with it and I'll use it for all kinds of things like food prep, processing wood for a fire, riding, on my motorcycle and throughout all conditions, and especially when it's raining or when it's pretty foggy or moist outside. So I would like a rust proof knife. So this is the knife that falls into the category of purpose built for a practical purpose. And I use this knife mainly for, camping in particular, but also it's an EDC knife for sure. And I'll carry it in any conditions. If I'm going to go swimming in a lake, I live on a lake, or even in the ocean, I'll carry this. Or I'm going to go hike, and this might be my backup carry because when I'm hiking, I like a very capable knife also. But it's a knife that I will carry for EDC for sure. And also I use it for everyday kind of activities, opening boxes, food prep, and all kinds of things. What is this? So let's just get right into it. So this is made by Kunwu. It's a company that I'm not sure where he's located, but the owner is Serbian, and he outsources. I'm not even sure if he outsources them, but these are made in China. So I'm not sure if it's his own facility and he's making them in China or he has a third party making them. He's kind of vague about it. I've asked him a couple of times what's going on there, and he's ignored my question. So there you go. So this is a frame lock knife that's got a pretty good frame lock on it too. It's what is that? One third locked. It's got a steel lock bar insert, and it also has an internal over travel stop. It's got a great feel to it. I love this knife. It's got an awesome choke up position here in this finger choil, and I have pretty big hands, 2XL hands, and my whole hand fits on it even without getting into the choil. It's got some meat left over, and you can definitely use that as a pummel. So that's really, really cool. The scales have a lot of cutouts in it for weight reduction. So while we're in it, let's get into this. How much does it weigh? All right, pull out the scale here. Let's see if you can see it. There we go. See if you can see the numbers. Well, I guess I should turn it on. Can you see? Yeah, you can see that. All right. It is 5.3 ounces or 149 grams. So 5.3 ounces for me is a decent weight. I mean, I like a heavy knife, so it could be even heavier as far as I'm concerned, but certainly not a lightweight knife. If that's they took about a ounce per blade length, per inch in blade length, and this exceeds that mathematics, but I think it's a good weight. It is a tip up only carry, so you can do the pocket clip is reversible, so it could be a left or right pocket clip attachment here, but it's tip up only. This has a front flipper and a thumb hole for a flipper. So I really can't flip this out. It could be because of the detent of my knife. It's really strong. Even if I keep my fingers off the lock bar, it's very difficult for me to slow roll this. So I wouldn't really, call this a slow rolling knife, but although I've seen other people that do it, and I wouldn't really say it's an enjoyable thumb flipping knife. But what is enjoyable is this reverse flick. Man, that's so good. And the front flipper. I've really become to enjoy the front flipper action. Take me a little while to get used to it. So the first time you get this, if you've never done a front flipper, you'll be like, oh man, what's wrong with this knife? But so it's got really, in my opinion, it's got two enjoyable ways of flipping open this knife. It's also on bearings, so it's got a really smooth action, and it's actually almost too smooth. And we'll get into that in the my likes and dislikes. But you know, look at that. See how smooth that is. The knife does have a lanyard hole. It is not necessarily prioritized over the pocket clip, or you know, it just kind of like sticks out a little bit. So I wouldn't say that's prioritized, but it does have a lanyard hole for you weirdos that like lanyards, which is, I'm joking, right? If you like lanyards, I don't care. That's great. It's not really a deep carry knife. You know, when you put it in your pocket, a little bit sticks out. So let's just see. Let me use our famous little political mail that I'm getting here. So, you know, that much of it sticks out. I kind of like it sticking out of my pocket a little bit. You can just grab it. It's easier to grab out of your pocket and deploy it. But if you're looking for concealed carry, this is not your knife. I would say, you know, generally this is a big knife. It's a tall knife. It's wide in the pocket. You know, it's not a real slender knife, and it's kind of long closed. Let's look at some of the measurements here. Pull out my little measuring device here, and so closed length, and I'm going to go from the tip of this flipper. It's just about 5 inches long, closed, and open. It is, let's call that 8 inches. It looks like a hair over 8 inches, but for argument's sake, let's say that's 8 inches. So it's not really a small knife, and where it's not small in particular is how tall it is. So it's a little bit of a pocket hog. You know, for me, it doesn't bother me because I only carry one thing in my pocket. So it takes up the whole pocket, and that's what's in there anyway. So it doesn't really matter to me. But it is what it is. And this knife came in perfectly centered, and I flipped it a million times. I mean, I've owned this knife for quite a while. I own a lot of knives for quite a while, and I've never reviewed, you know, not even half of the knives that I have. So, you know, I need to, you know, review more of my knives, but I just haven't done it. And the problem is, you know, I get this when it's brand new, and you know, it's everybody is interested in it, and then it takes me a year to review it. So I'm going to try to get better at that. When I get a new knife in, I'm going to try to do a video on it right away. This pocket clip, I really like it. It's got this little insignia here. That's Kunwu. It's a little K. What I like about their knives in particular is there's not a ton of branding on here, right? There's this pivot here that has this very typical Kunwu design to it. But if you didn't know that that's their like almost trademark, then it would just look like a pivot with a design on it. And you know, on the blade, it has Padre and then Vanax. And that's another thing. This knife is a Vanax knife. And if you know anything about me and this channel, I love that steel Vanax. I just like a nitrogen-based steel that's completely rust-proof. And that's what this is. At least the blade is. We'll get into some of the measurements. So these measurements here are, you know, off the website. So if I say something different as I measure it, that's just because, you know, it doesn't matter. These measurements are right off the website. So it's 8.03 inches long. The blade length is 3.34 inches. The cutting blade length is, so that, you know, when I say blade length, I mean the blade stock. And the cutting edge is 3.07 inches. The handle thickness is 0.527 inches. So like a half an inch. So that's kind of thick. I wouldn't say that's thin for sure, but it doesn't feel real thick. But I like a bigger knife, so you got to, you know, understand where I'm coming from. If you like a petite knife, this is definitely not a petite knife. The blade thickness is 0.146 inches. And as I said, the blade material is Vanax. The handle material is titanium. And we already gave you the weight, 5.3 ounces according to the website. And I think that's what I said. So it matches what the website says. And the hardware here are their T8 on the pivot, the clip, and the body. And then the only thing that's a T6 is this steel lock bar insert. Let's get into the likes and dislikes. One of my dislikes about this knife is that the blade drops like a guillotine. I mean, that's really smooth action, but you don't want to, drop it, from this methodology, because it will just drop right down on you and cut you. I mean, this knife has cut me a couple of times. You see, if you look at it, it will drop and hit you in all kinds of different places, right? So the way I like to close this knife is I'll do this type of grip. I'll pull up from the inside, push it down a little bit, and then let it fall. Or even do it this way. Let it fall. This knife has a lot of hot spots. When I was moving, at one point I was about to move, and I was cutting down a ton of boxes, throwing away some garbage, cutting material into smaller pieces, cutting stuff to fit inside of a box for packing material, all kinds of cutting, and it's got a lot of hot spots, particularly around the pocket clip. If you put a lot of pressure on this knife when you're cutting, it's going to dig into your hand, and I wouldn't say it's entirely ergonomic. It's good. I mean, it's great for EDC. It's not going to bother your EDC task. But if you're going to work on it all day long and use this knife all day long, it wasn't a lot of fun. Like I said, for this particular knife, the thumb hole is not really very useful. Right? I can't slow roll it, and I got my fingers off the lock bar. I just want to show you that because I know how you guys will say, take your finger off the lock bar. And it is. And, it's a shame because that would be 3 deployment methods. And for me, there's only 2. But the 2 that there are amazing. I mean, this reverse flip, whew, I love that thing. And then even the front flip. A lot of fun. Very cool. So really no complaints there, but I'm pointing it out, and I've seen people thumb flick it and slow roll it, and it could have been their knife is tuned differently than mine. And so it is what it is, but for me, it's not the greatest. I also don't like that there's texture, this titanium texture goes right underneath the pocket clip. So, it's a little bit of a pocket shredder. It fits really well in the pocket. The pocket clip itself works pretty good. I mean, it gets over my pants pocket, no problem. And a lot of times I'll just drop it in my pocket and I won't even use the pocket clip. But it would have been nice if it was smooth underneath the pocket clip. So, you don't want to be buying pants all the time because it's getting tore up by your knife. Another criticism I'm going to put down or dislike is this hardware here is questionable in my mind, right? It's this is a special edition Padre. They only made so many of them, and it's numbered on the inside. This one says it's of 100, but I believe it was actually they made more than 100 because there was an ordering issue. They sold more than 100, and so instead of telling some people that here's your money back, they just made some more. I don't remember the exact number, but it's under 200. I think it was like 140 they made. Anyway, but so this is a limited edition. It's all DLC coded, supposedly. But I'll tell you right now, this pocket clip is not DLC coded. I don't know if you can tell. There's some of the titanium. You can see it reflecting. Some titanium showing through. And these hardware bits have not only is a DLC coating wear off, but it looks like it's pitting a little bit. I'm not even sure what material this. I mean, I believe it's steel, these fasteners, but I'm not sure if it's a stainless steel. And that's why I was saying earlier that I think this is a semi rust proof knife. And I just really not sure what those things are made out of. I asked Sergio, who's the owner, a couple of times what those fasteners are made out of, and he just doesn't answer the question. So that tells me that they're not stainless, or this, it's just very questionable. And I'm just not sure what the coating is on this, because DLC should not be wearing off. And I don't know if you can tell, but I think you can tell they wore off here. So that's what that is. I'd say one of the other dislikes I'm gonna point out to you guys, while it doesn't bother me, I'm just gonna point it out, is how wide this knife is, or how tall in this dimension this knife is. So if you want to put it in your pocket and put something else in your pocket, and then like reach into your pocket, this is going to take up, half the width of your pocket. So to me, it doesn't bother me. It's the only thing in my pocket anyway, but I'm pointing it out that that's a dislike for some people. Not for me, but for some people. Another dislike, I would say, is that the tip is really like a needle tip. So this is a good and bad thing, but it is a pretty narrow tip. So on the upside, it's a great piercing tip, but on the downside is, I'm sure, like, it'd be pretty easy to break this tip, snap it. So you don't really want to use your knife as a prying tool. Normally, I prefer a knife with a very strong tip to it. I like a very capable knife. Ideally, I would love a stainless steel slicey knife, and with all those properties to use for camping and whatever, with the strong tip. And I do have some knives like that, so this is not one of them. Also, while I love this finger choil, it's sometimes when you're cutting, like if you're cutting cardboard or a lot of material, the material will slide into the finger choil and get hung up. So if you grab the high on this knife, then there's less of a chance of that, right? Because your finger's blocking its path. But if you're, grabbing back here and you want to use the knife, like a normal knife, if you want to call it that way, this finger choil sometimes gets in the way of that. And also, from an aesthetic point of view, I'm going to call this a dislike, but it doesn't really bother me, but I'm going to call it out. That the lock bar cutout it could be internal. Now, he said something to Metal Complex is making a knife, and he wanted the lock bar cutout to be on the inside. And Sergio said something about, it's all about physics or whatever, that he couldn't do it. But I've got plenty of knives where they can do it, so I'm not really sure, why it has to be on the outside, from Kunwu's perspective. But, does it really bother me? No. I mean, this is a busy knife on this side anyway, and it doesn't bother me at all. But just pointing it out, it would have been nicer if it was on the inside from an aesthetic point of view to some people. So there you go. So let me get to the likes. So first thing I'm gonna call out is a like is the tip on So I said it was a dislike or a negative, let's say, but it's also a positive. It's like as a piercing tool, this tip is really good. Like if you had to use it in that way, in a piercing way, it is definitely very pointy. So I like that. What I love about this knife is the steel. Vanax is one of my favorite steels. It is, for a stainless steel, it retains an edge pretty well, considering it's stainless. That's usually one of the compromises when you get a stainless steel. You have to add chromium to it, and which is a little softer. When you add chromium to it, the edge retention is reduced typically because the chromium is a little bit softer than some of the steels. So one of the things I love about this knife, it's a nitrogen-based steel. It's Vanax. Vanax is a great rust-resistant steel, and then it has a DLC coating on it. And there's so many different variants you can buy. So while you can't get this variant any longer, they do sell DLC coated knives. They call it the tux, I believe. So like the blade is DLC coated, but the handle isn't. So I love that this is rust proof, and it's double rust proof with this DLC coating on it. I just really love a tall flat grind, which is what this knife is. It's got a beautiful belly to it. It's a really tall steel, and the flat grind begins underneath this hole here, and it is a very tall flat grind, so it gets very thin behind the edge. And this thing is a slicer, so let's go ahead and show you some slicing ability here. This is like a thick cardboard, and man, that cuts really good. I don't know if you can tell that. And if it was paper, it would, slice right through it. Let's see, do I have any paper? Here. And let me show you what it's like with the paper. Look at that. So it's a very good slicer. Now I've used this knife a ton, camping and whatnot, food prep. It's great with cutting onions, eating your meat, cutting your meat. With this belly here, man, you can do some rocking cuts with a pinch grip because of the way the handle is, because of the way the blade is lower than the handle. You can get this blade on top of the material before it hits the handle. It's really great. Let me see if I can illustrate that. So imagine this is a table. You see how like the blade will touch the table before the handle will. So you can get down pretty far, and then you can rock the cut and roll the cut. So it's a great cutter. You can cut rope, you can cut food, you can dice stuff when you're camping. This is a great blade shape. I mean, the tall flat grind with the belly, and the tips. I would say this is like a sheep's foot with the drop point. So that's a great shape. I mean, this is just a really good shape. I also love the way it fits in my hands. This is a pretty ergonomic knife, except for when you're trying to hard use it and then it hurts a little bit. But if you're just using it regularly and holding it, fits really good in my hand. I mean, it's just a pleasure to use, for EDC tasks. And the jimping's not really rough, which I like. And I love the lines of this knife. It's got some pretty interesting design lines. There's different surfaces to the knife. It's flat here, and then it's sloped over here, and then it's got a line break here, and then it's sloped in this way, and then the belly shaped like this. Just really, really good. I like the design of it. What I also love about this knife is this reverse flip. This is a great deployment method. I just love that. That is so commanding. That is amazing. And I love the sound of that. Let me shut up and listen to this sound. See if the camera picks it up. It's like a thwunk. Love that. It's my favorite. And it just has nice sounds inside, the titanium body when it closes. And it's got very, very interesting sounds. I love this backspacer. It has some texture to it. It just gives it a nice look. It's got some good design language to it. And the pivot has a Timascus pivot. You can't really maybe tell too well in the video. It's got purple in it around the pivot collar, and I don't think every version has that, but this one does. But that's a nice little touch, I think. And because this knife stock is not really that thick, and it's so tall, that this knife really gets slicey. I can't tell you how slicey this thing is. I showed it to you. It's just a great EDC knife. It really is. And it's a knife that you don't have to worry about. You can use it and abuse it. Go out, like I said, you can go kayaking. I mean, I'm a kayaker. I'll take this knife with me and I'll put it into my shorts, and I'll go for a swim, or I'll splash myself, and I don't worry about this thing at all. I mean, I get home and I'll just take it out of my pocket and put it on the counter. Or maybe I'll rinse it again to get some of the gunk out of the hardware, and don't even pat it down with the towel. It's just you just don't have to worry about a knife like this. There's just no maintenance. Now, like I said, I criticize the hardware here. I'm not really sure if that's a valid criticism or not, but so far there's no rust on this knife, and I have definitely abused it. It's one of the knives, some people say in this channel that I don't use my knives, and it's true that, I am not a guy in the construction business pulling out my knife and cutting like 2x4s or, sheetrock, or, I'm not working in a loading dock and cutting zip ties all day long, or straps, or, I'm an office guy, and that I don't really use a knife, at work. And when I'll use it mainly is for EDC tests at home, which is what, hardly anything. And then for camping. In camping, I'll hard use this knife. I mean, I'll feather stick with it. In particular, that's what I'll mainly do. That's harder use on it, right? Feather sticking a piece of wood to get a fire started, and food prep. I'll feather stick it. I'll wash it. Sometimes I'll use soap. Wash it down, and then I might use it to eat. Another thing I love about this knife is solid. The lockup on it is just rock solid. There's no play at all. Up, down, left, right. It feels like a fixed blade when it's open. I do like this finger choil. So the finger choil serves two purposes. One is you can get up on it and have a real controlled cutting, by the belly of the blade. And it also is a great sharpening choil. It's way past the plunge grind here. You'll be able to sharpen this knife several times, many, many, many times, and not create a smile. So I do like the finger choil. Does the material slip off of it, and does the finger choil get in the way? Yeah, but, I'm not that kind of user where that bothers me that much. It's just, like I said, I don't use a knife that much. I mean, I do love that the jimping on this knife is not really rough. There's really not a lot of rough spots here at all. Though I did say there's hot spots when I hard use it. It's mainly around the clip area, like back here in particular when you're grabbing it, and even here. This kind of digs into my hand a little bit, and it's not bad when you just got a tight grip on it. It's certainly not bad. But like I said, if you're pushing through 3-layer cardboard, or just dragging it through material, it began to hurt my hand. It was like an all day. I was using the knife all day, many, many days in a row. And I like this murder grip, which I never used, but it feels comfortable in your hand there, and here you don't even feel the pocket clip. So that might be the way to use this knife. The frame lock opening is fantastic, nice and wide. They're equal to each other in terms of height, so sometimes it's nice when they have the frame lock a little bit higher than the forward or the show side of the scale. But this is wide enough of an opening, and it's cut out a little bit on the inside here on both sides, that I can get my fat finger in there, and the opening's really easy to get to. It's useful, easy to get to. Certainly not going to complain about that. I also like the size of this knife. It's a good size. 8 inches is perfect. I can get all 4 of my fingers on it, even when I'm not choked up on it. It's got the suggested finger groove area. My hand falls in place there, no problem. Goes up over here. I love this banana shape to it. It's almost similar to like an XM18, Hinder XM18. It feels good. I just love how it just fits my hand, and it's sloped backwards like that. So when you grab it, it's almost like a boomerang. I don't know if you can tell, But it's a great blade shape. I also love that there's not a lot of billboarding on this knife. I hate when they put a lot of words and, whatever. This has white lettering on a black blade. It could have been, they could have made it a different shade of black so it wouldn't stand out as much. But quite honestly, it doesn't bother me. But I do like the fact that you really can't see too much billboarding on it. And when the blade's closed, you can't see anything, really. So that's good. And the last thing, I'm going to say that this knife feels like a quality knife. So I love that about that. Cheaper knives, do feel a little bit cheaper. There is certain, this definitely doesn't feel very cheap at all. All right, so how does this knife compare to other knives in terms of size? So here we got is a Demko 20.5. AD 20.5, I think. So it is longer than, Demko 20.5, and it is thicker. Considerably thicker. How does it compare to a Chavez 229 kickstop? I love this knife. All right, it's a tiny bit smaller than a Chavez. And it's actually as thick as a Chavez. It's deceiving because Chavez is like a brick, right? And you would think that there's nothing as bricky as that, but no, this Kunwu Padre gives it a run for its money. So, but definitely the Chavez feels thicker. So that's that. How about the infamous 940, Benchmade 940? Okay, so it's a little bit bigger than that. Now this 940 just feels like a tiny knife, right? But it's got a big punch for a tiny little knife. Yep. So it's a little bit bigger than that. There we go. Put these off to the side. How does it compare to a Spyderco Native 5? So it's considerably longer than a Spyderco Native 5. And it's much heavier. And it's just a little bit thicker. Oh, this is an unfair comparison. A Hogue Deca. So it is, maybe I should be putting this thing out here. Let me do that. All right, so there's a Hogue and this one. So it is, let's call it 3/4 of an inch larger, the Padre. And the Hogue is like super thin and super light. So just really no comparison, but it's almost an inch bigger and heavier and wider. All right, let's compare it to a Benchmade Adamas. Now, here we go. It is really only about a 1/2 inch longer, but it's pretty thick. So maybe just as thick. Spyderco Para 2. All right, here we go. Para 2, Paramilitary 2, is a little bit bigger, by a 1/4 inch bigger. But it is thinner, certainly in the handle. And it's almost... And this is wider too. The blade, the whole body of it's wider, especially when it's closed. I'm sure. Let's check it out. Compression lock. Yeah, there you go. You know what? With the hump here, it's about as wide. but this is only wide in one little spot, where this is wide all over. All right, there's that. Let's compare it to a Strider SNG. All right, just a little bit smaller than a Strider. How about one of my favorite knives? The Les George VCPN. Man, it's like a half an inch smaller than a VCPN. Oh, here we go. This is the knife, the handle that I was comparing it to. This is an XM18, and you can see this has got like a little bit of a sloped handle, right? Where this is sloped the whole way, the XM18 is a little flat surface here, and then it slopes backwards. But it's a little bit smaller than my XM18, but it's kind of in that same category, and it's definitely wider than the XM18. All right, just one more. Well, two more, I guess. Here is a Ritter Hogue. You know, it's just a tiny bit smaller than a Ritter Hogue, but it's definitely wider, you know, like taller, and it's just as thick. But the Hogue definitely feels better in the hand. It's a much more ergonomic design than this. This is just, you know, it's flat slab of titanium with the pocket clip that kind of digs into your hand a little bit. And last but not least, a Hinderer Eclipse. I love this Eclipse. I think the Eclipse is my favorite Hinderer. It's a little bit shorter than the Hinderer Eclipse. Nowhere near as ergonomic. This knife here, the Eclipse, is just perfect ergonomics on it. I love this knife, and it's wider than the Eclipse. All right, so that's that. I'm going to pause and put these knives away. All right, so in conclusion, I love this knife. I love the company Kunwu. They're doing a lot of great things out there. I have several of their knives. I haven't reviewed all of them. So one of the other things I like about the Kunwu is they do the heat treat perfectly. So this is supposedly heat treated between 60 and 62. So they're targeting 61 HRC, and that's exactly where you want Vanax to be. All right, so in conclusion, what is the purpose of this knife? And I think I touched on it at the beginning, where I think this knife, where it fits into my, use, when am I going to use it, is particularly in wet environments and in camping in particular, because it's great for food prep. It's great for low maintenance. It's got an amazing tall flat grind with this beautiful belly on it. So it's great for, slicing, dicing, or roll cuts. It's a good piercing tool. It's something where you just don't have to worry about it. There's like no maintenance to this knife at all. And when you're camping, you really don't want to have to worry about anything. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this review. This is one of my favorite knives. I highly recommend it. You should go out and buy it. All right, well, thank you for watching this channel, and please subscribe to it and leave a thumbs up for this video, and go and check out my playlist. I've got a lot of great knife content there, and enjoy yourself and watch some videos. And until next time, I will see you.